I'm going to take you on a short but crucial ride and give you hard, unmistakable evidence of how the quality of the PAP has deteriorated over the years. But first, I want to point out that I have no interest in bad-mouthing the PAP for the sake of it. I do this only because the PAP ministers keep running the propaganda that they are exceptional and that Parliament would be better off without an opposition. For example, Mr. Chan Chun Sing says that Singapore must possess exceptional leadership teams that can win the trust of the people. It has conditioned the people into believing this propaganda. This is dangerous for Singapore. We need to bust that myth. Having greater opposition representation in Parliament after the next GE has huge implications for our lives and our future. So grab a cup of coffee, and here we go. And let's start with the inexcusable behavior of then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong over his handling of the Tan Chuan Jin affair. In June 2023, the government dropped the bombshell news that then Speaker of Parliament had resigned his post because of an extramarital affair with another PAP MP, Ms. Cheng Li Hui. Mr. Lee disclosed that he was aware of Tan's romantic involvement with Cheng as far back as 2020, shortly after the last GE. Back then, he had confronted the Speaker over the matter, but inexplicably allowed Tan to remain in his position for another 3 years. According to Lee, he wanted to give Tan and Cheng a softer exit. Mr. Lee forgets that he is not some grandfather dealing with his children, but the Prime Minister of Singapore handling affairs of the state. I'm reminded of another Lee who once said that whoever wishes to govern Singapore must have that iron in him. The matter didn't end there. It wasn't until February 2023, 2.5 years later, that Lee revisited the issue. This time round, Tan tendered his resignation. But Lee continued to allow him to remain in his post for another 5 months. Did Mr. Lee not think that there was a danger of Tan's position being compromised and that it could jeopardize functions of the state? And not only that, the entire matter was kept from the public for 3 full years. So when PM Lawrence Wong recently said that the government will be upfront and transparent, I don't know whether to laugh or to cry. Now the curious thing is that it wasn't the first time that Mr. Lee had to deal with such a matter. In 2012, Michael Palmer, also Speaker of the House at that time, was caught in an amorous relationship with a grassroots member who was not his wife. 4 years later, another PAP MP, David Ong, also had an illicit tryst with a grassroots worker. So it wasn't that Mr. Lee did not have any experience in having to deal with such matters. Yet he acted like a deer caught in a headlight over the Tan Chuan Jin affair. The ineptitude raised many eyebrows, not to mention questions. Then there was a screw-up involving Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, who was then in charge of the Smart Nation drive. Balakrishnan had announced in 2020 that the government would introduce a device for contact tracing during the COVID-19 pandemic. He promised that the device would not track an individual's location. The data would be used, quote, purely for contact tracing, period. As it turned out, the promise lasted only 6 months. In January 2021, the minister had to do a keblakang pusing and break the news that the police had indeed used data for its investigations. Here's the question that's screaming to be asked. Why did the minister not do his homework before claiming that the data would be used only for contact tracing? Even stranger, why did his colleague from Home Affairs not point out his error? Embarrassingly, it was, according to Dr. Balakrishnan himself, a member of the public who had alerted him to the faux pas. Who was sleeping, him or Shanmugam? Now, the pair was embroiled in another controversy when they each rented a state-owned black and white bungalow at Rideout Road. But curiously, it was their wives, not them, who submitted the applications for the rentals and subsequently signed the tenancy agreements. I've repeatedly asked the question, why? Why did they rent the properties under their wives' names instead of their own? So far, I've only heard an echo. Now, during the parliamentary hearing over the incident, Mr. Shanmugam also disclosed that he owned another good class bungalow which he was preparing to sell off and therefore needed to rent the one at Rideout Road. Now, shortly thereafter, the minister managed to sell off his bungalow for an eye-popping $88 million. We've asked Mr. Shanmugam several questions pertaining to the sale, one of which was, just who did he sell his house to? It's been several weeks since the story broke, but Mr. Shanmugam has remained silent on the matter. Of course, no discussion of PAP incompetence would be complete without the mention of Mr. Chee Hong Tat over at the Ministry of Transport. My namesake, but definitely not my relation, first came into true prominence when he bungled the installation of the new MRT ticketing system called Simply Go. Long story short, the exercise drew a public backlash so severe that the minister also did a keblakang pusing and abandoned the project. The U-turn cost taxpayers another $40 million. The minister added to his fast-growing resume the ERP 2.0 debacle, which required motorists to install an onboard unit in their vehicles. The initial odd placement of the OBU was widely panned by motorists, which led to a massive petition signed by the irate users calling on the government to look into the design and cost of the new system. Then came the latest season of MRT breakdowns. In September, the East-West line staged a 5-day disruption that affected 500,000 trips a day. It was the worst disruption in the MRT system's 37-year history. Now get this, the breakdown happened after the government spent $2.6 billion, yes, billion with a B, to renew the North-South and East-West lines. A month later, a train on the LRT system in Bukit Panjang also broke down. A rescue train was dispatched to tow the broken carriage back, but yep, you guessed it, the rescuer train also broke down. You can't make this stuff up. Again, the LRT meltdown occurred despite the government spending $344 million in a renewal project which started in 2018. The LTA said that the renewal works were to enhance reliability of the system and that a better travel experience awaits commuters. The matter seems like a cruel joke. Now, through the years, the MRT system has been plagued by electrical failures, floods, collisions, cracks in carriages, management problems, which resulted in injuries and even deaths. As if not to be upstaged, the Finance Ministry also waded in for dishonorable mention. In 2016, money stolen from one NDB by then Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak, who is now serving a lengthy jail term, found its way into Singapore, US $700 million to be precise. MAS Managing Director Ravi Menon said that the incident tarred Singapore's reputation as a financial center. What happened is simply unacceptable, he pointed out the obvious. That unacceptability only led a few years later to a cabal of Chinese nationals who laundered more than $3 billion in Singapore. Now, mind you, this is despite a wanted notice issued by China in 2015 for some of these individuals. Super sleuth our government is clearly not. A year later, another syndicate, this time from Japan, was accused of washing $600 million in Singapore. It is not for nothing that we have become known as a money laundering center. Now, this next matter I'm going to tell you truly beggars belief. In 2017, the Temasek-owned Keppel Offshore and Marine, or KOM, pleaded guilty in a New York court to participating in a bribery scandal involving Petrobras, a Brazilian oil company. Now, the incident involved KOM paying $74 million in bribes between 2001 and 2014. It was one of the biggest scandals in US history, with KOM ending up having to pay US $422 million to the US government and later another $88 million to Brazilian authorities in fines. Now, KOM's parent company was Keppel Corp, whose board of directors was chaired at that time by former PAP Minister Lee Boon Yang. As chairman, one of Dr. Lee's responsibilities included taking a leading role to achieve and maintain a high standard of corporate governance. Really? Remember, the bribes took place over a period of 14 years. Why didn't anybody question where the payments of $74 million went to during the entire period? Someone had taken a very long nap. Now, back home in Singapore, the CPIB issued only stern warnings to 6 former KOM staff and then unbelievably refused to name them. At about this time, Singaporeans woke up one morning to the incredible news that a huge swathe of the crunchy forest had been cleared by mistake. This mistake occurred despite the fact that such a massive operation must have required the coordination of multiple government departments and agencies. Like the trace together embarrassment, the government also didn't realize the problem until a member of the public posted aerial photographs of the denuded forest. And who can forget Mr. Heng Swee Keat's fumbling of the unveiling of his East Coast plan on nomination day during the last G? It's best I play the clip in case you think I'm exaggerating.
For our East Coast residents, we also have a plan for the East Coast. We have East Coast, Singapore, we have a together at East Coast plan. We care at East Coast.
Mr. Heng is now our Deputy Prime Minister. And then there is the irrepressible Mr. Chan Chun Sing, who had privately cussed Singaporeans who were panic buying face masks during the pandemic as xia sui and idiots. Then he mistook sheep for a plant and became an instant internet meme. Of course, there is Mr. Iswaran, who inappropriately accepted gifts and is now sitting in a prison cell. Oh, believe me, there are other screw-ups where I can't list out, but there are only so many hours in a day. I want to repeat what I said at the beginning of this video. My message is not that the PAP is all bad. No political party or government is 100% good or 100% bad. But the party is most certainly not exceptional, and neither are its ministers by any stretch of the imagination. And if you're not exceptional, be more humble and don't demand exceptional salaries. And most of all, accept the fact that the PAP needs meaningful opposition in Parliament to help make Singapore better. I take pains to provide you with facts and concrete evidence like I do in this video, so that you can exercise critical thinking and not be swayed by the PAP's propaganda. Blind support for the PAP, blind faith, lulls society into thinking that things are fine when they are clearly not. And worse, that there is no alternative to the PAP.